This marks, roughly, this month marks the third anniversary of my recovery from ovarian cancer. It happened, as I say, 3 years ago. And prior to that time, I had been familiar with the Bob Beck Protocol in a general sort of way. I used it occasionally, and I made quantities of colloidal silver for people who are in animal rescue, because it healed the ulcerated eyelids of little kittens and so on. Things came to a head when one of my students dropped a load of papers off her wheelchair, and I did the natural thing, which was swoop down to pick them up for her. And I was so beset by pain, I could not pick myself up. Somebody else had to retrieve her papers, help me over to my car in the parking lot. I drove home, got a neighbor to take me over to Holy Cross, because things had definitely taken a turn. And so they did. I checked in. They announced about a day or so later that I had pneumonia. I was anemic. There were some problems. Apparently, they did not know exactly what they were, but there was some obstruction in the pelvic area. They suspected possible cancer in the uterine area, and got my consent to a number of operations. When I finally woke up and was told what had happened, I had suffered a hysterectomy, a colostomy, presumably removal of most, if not all, of the cancer cells in the abdominal area. The radiologist said on his report, which I saw in the discharge summary, said that he had detected some metastasis. The hospital staff had made out a couple of slips, appointment slips, with one a radiation oncologist and another was a chemotherapy oncologist. And I had an instinct that said that was not the way for me to go. So when I got home, I picked up the phone and called the offices and canceled the appointments, and then went full bore into the Bob Beck Protocol. This means I would apply the blood pulsar to my wrist at least an hour every day. Now, I know that the instructions are to use it for 2 hours, but the wrist became a little bit itchy, and I figured that enough is enough. I did that. The magnetic pulsar I applied to the areas of the lymph glands that are set forth in that little diagram that Beck supplies with it. And so I got the lymph glands under the throat and jawline and so on over the rest of my body for a period of roughly 20 minutes per day. I was recovering rather nicely. My workman came to visit me and said, "My goodness, you're looking well." I said, "Yeah, sure, why not?" Or something like that. And he said, "Well, you know, the surgeon told me you had only 6 months to live." So bully for me, I think. Anyway, not knowing what sense to make out of the discharge papers, I looked them over, and I know what the word metastasize means. And there was metastasis that their radiologist had discovered. So I called a former internist whom I had been associated with and read the whole discharge summary to him. He said, "Anna, you're going to die." So I giggled at him. I said, "Of course I am. I think we all are, unless you know something that I don't." Anyway, he said, No, I didn't mean that. I meant at your advanced age, I think you should consult a radiation oncologist and a chemotherapy oncologist to see whether it would even be worth putting you through this discomfort at this time. His intentions, of course, were kindly. He said, "And by the way, you might as well try to track the 2 cancer markers, the CA-125 for ovarian and the 19-9 for pancreatic." And I thanked him and rang off and didn't think too much of it. I asked my internist whether I should, how I could find out. He said, "Well, you might consult the chief surgeon." So I went way out to Covina to see him, and it was the most extraordinary interview I've ever had with a physician. First of all, he was enraged. I don't know if the girls prepared him for my visit, but I was there only to find out about the man who had inserted the vena cava so I could track him down and ask him about reversing it. This man, his name was Dr. He was as red, not as a beet, but he was cerise colored, that ugly, unhealthy color. His face was flushed, his throat was throbbing, his blue eyes were blazing. This was the first time I had ever seen anybody that close to an absolute apoplectic fit. And he had found it very hard to control his emotions. How dared I to not comply with the recommendation of the staff to undergo chemo and radiation? And I said, well, I was just exercising the patient's Bill of Rights to design my own healing. He was, as I say, he was absolutely infuriated. And we exchanged some, he then decided to tell me what a horrible fate I faced if I did not comply with his suggestion. He would have been a real asset to the Spanish Inquisition. I mean, he dwelt on the unpleasantness, and you could see that he was sort of relishing it, or relishing telling me about it. So I ignored these things and said, by the way, I'm interested in having somebody track the CA-125 and CA-19-9 cancer markers. One of my former internists told me about them. He said, I will have nothing to do with anybody who associates himself with alternative medicine. And with that, he stormed out of his own examining room, leaving his assistant rather puzzled, and me, of course, totally floored by this conduct. Anyway, when I relayed the story to Dr. He said, well, sure, I'll track them for you. And that's one of the nice points about my recovery. The cancer, the ovarian cancer, was 102 in the hospital. It's now around 12. It has dipped down to 8 and is up. Anything below 35 is totally safe, they say. And so I am and have been for 3 years now, totally out of danger there. And the pancreatic cancer has dropped down to the 40s when it was in the upper 80s. And apparently that is not a danger signal at all. There were other things to my healing. Two of my friends, one of them said, I will pray for you, and I will ask my friends to pray for you. And I thanked her for that. And after a few weeks, I called up the first friend, because this was a strictly informal thing, and I said, look, tell you and your friends to stop asking, just start saying thank you. Because I definitely felt that something had happened. I'm not a Catholic. I'm not very devout in the conventional sense, but something had happened. My present internist is very pleased with my record. I'm out of danger with both types of treatment, with both types of cancer. I'm out of the danger area, and also they keep drifting southward, downward, you know. And so he's immensely pleased with that. And in my presence, he actually picked up the phone and called Soda Instruments in Canada and ordered 2 of those pieces of equipment for use on himself and his brother. It has worked for me. I cannot guarantee that it will work for somebody else, but that is true of every kind of nostrum, even of the conventional treatments that are prescribed nowadays. So I would say it's everybody's duty to become aware of as much as he or she can, and to make use of this, and to fight with the rest of us for our right to have access to this kind of remedy. I have felt increasingly in command of my own resources, mental, spiritual, physical, and I don't feel ill. I think this projects itself. There isn't a very positive way to say that, except I feel normal, I feel healthy, I feel all there. And you sort of know at some subconscious level whether things are a little bit off or not. Certainly I knew I was off things before the operation, before the hospital visit and so on. I feel immensely recharged. I have sufficient energy, I think. I'm 81, and I continue to teach a class once a week in computer technology, and I am surviving, I think, very satisfactorily, buoyed up by the high spirits of some pussycats who are good friends, very good friends, and my other friends.